was never paranoid in that life, You know that if you make a mistake, your best friend can walk you into a room, you don't walk out again. I was never really worried about that because I did my best to follow the rules, follow the policies, not step out of line. And so I never had to worry about that. Of course, there was one night when I was walked into a room. I didn't know if I was going to walk out. But that was more politics than anything else at that time. And yes, I was scared that night, no question about it. When you think you're going to meet your maker, it's scary. But I'm
Do you
here.
mind telling us a
Uh,
bit of context of that, please? So, what was going on? Why did you get called into the room? What was the potential outcome? So, I'm really excited to have our next guest on, Mr. Michael Franzese. He is very well known on YouTube right now. I'll give a quick intro into his background, and then I'm going to invite Michael to add anything, and then we'll get straight into the quick fire questions. We're going to focus on mental health. So, Michael Franzese is a former American mobster who was a caporegime captain of the Colombo crime family and the son of the former underboss, Sonny Franzese. Michael was enrolled in pre-med program, but you apparently dropped out to make money for your family after your father was sentenced to 50 years in prison for a bank robbery in 1967. Is that all correct so far?
so far, you're correct. Yes, you got it.
He eventually helped implement a scheme to defraud the federal government of gasoline taxes in the early 80s. So now, Michael, you're in your 70s, but by the age of 35, Fortune magazine listed you as number 18 on its list of the 50 most wealthy and powerful mafia bosses. I heard that in the height of your career, you were generating up to $8 million per week. And then eventually it all came crashing down because in 1986, you were sentenced to 10 years on conspiracy charges, released in 89, then rearrested in 91 for parole violations, ultimately released in 94. And a big part of your prison sentence is solitary confinement, which is something we'll discuss. 29 months and 8 days. Did I get that right?
7 days.
So,
I don't want to.
okay.
I don't want to add an extra hour to that. So,
Yeah. Every single minute counts, I imagine. And what I find most fascinating about you, Michael, is your redemption story. So you've renounced the mobster lifestyle. You've spoken very openly in numerous interviews. I've watched many of them about how it damaged not just your family, but everybody around it. And you made a fascinating point, which is on that list that I mentioned of all the bosses. There were 50, right? And if I've got this right, one of them is in prison, and there's you, and all the other 48 are dead.
that's correct.
And soon afterwards, you retired to California. Now you're a motivational speaker and a writer. You're huge on YouTube. You've got well over 1 million subscribers on your own channel. You've been interviewed by some heavy hitters, including Piers Morgan. He asked you some interesting questions, namely, have you killed anybody? I'm not going to ask you that, don't worry.
Right.
And you've spoken heavily about finding religion, and you have a very settled family life now with how many kids and grandkids do you have now?
I have 7 kids, 7 grandkids.
Well, that is a lot. That's a handful. Personally, I'm a really big fan of yours because I think you speak very eloquently and thoughtfully. We've got this connection now through Sean Atwood, but I've been watching your videos for years. And one thing that really strikes me is how you're quite honest. You don't glamorize the lifestyle, but at the same time, you don't sugarcoat it either. And I feel remiss to not mention the fact that you were name checked in Goodfellas, which is one of my favorite films of all time, maybe even possibly my favorite film of all time. So that in a nutshell is your background. Anything important that I've missed out?
No, I think you summarized it quite well. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So if I start with quite a general question, please, Michael, a broad question, just tell us a little bit about the mental health, your mental health in the life of the mafia. So, for example, I imagine that there must be an element of paranoia because you could be, caught at any moment. What was it like for you?
It's I don't know if I'm unusual or maybe I'm like a lot of the other guys, but my wife kind of struggles with this too because she said that things don't seem to get you down. You seem to handle things, differently than a lot of people. So what I mean by that, I was never paranoid in that life, You know that if you make a mistake, your best friend can walk you into a room, you don't walk out again. I was never really worried about that because I did my best to follow the rules, follow the policies, not step out of line. And so I never had to worry about that. Of course, there was one night when I was walked into a room. I didn't know if I was going to walk out, but that was more politics than anything else at that time. And yes, I was scared that night, no question about it. When you think you're going to meet your maker, it's scary. But I'm
Do you
here.
mind telling us a bit of context of that, please? So what was going on? Why did you get called into the room? What was the potential outcome?
Well, without giving, the whole backstory, I was making a lot of money and I had a lot of friends in all the families. As a result of that, I was spreading the wealth around pretty well. And there was a story written in a Long Island paper that I was getting powerful enough to break away from the Colombos, my family, and start my own family. There was no truth to it at all. It was just total nonsense. It wasn't even a thought. I was as surprised as anyone else when I read the remark. But, it gets into people's heads. Make a long story short, I think they just wanted to let me know who was boss, and show me that. And they brought me into a room one night under very scary circumstances and just started questioning me about how much money I was making. Did I have any crazy thoughts about doing things? And, I started to get angry at the meeting. And, you don't get angry with the boss. I said, listen, it looks like I'm going to walk out of here. I got to maintain my composure, which I did. But it was a scary night, and we all go through that at some point in that life where we're going to face something that's gonna rattle us a bit. But other than that, I never really worried about it because, like I said, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I tried to maintain the policy and the rules. And I dealt with that life, pretty well. I
Yeah.
was also a major target of law enforcement. I had 18 arrests. I had 7 indictments. I went to trial 5 times. I was in more grand juries than you can imagine. So, I give an example. I went to a doctor not too long ago, and I had this condition. It's called alopecia, where some of your beard starts to go away.
Yeah.
And the doc said to me, he says, Michael, that's normally, from stress. Do you have stress? I said, hey, doc, I don't know. I said, I've lived a certain way. I don't know what stress is or what it isn't. I just live my normal life. So it's just how, everybody's different in how they deal with things. And I think I was pretty fortunate and blessed the way I dealt with my struggles in life.
Was there a sense of maybe paranoia is not the right word, but was there a sense of anxiety that the police were watching you all the time? And we all know that they can use underhand tactics. So did it feel like at any moment that you could be, arrested? There could be trumped up charges. There could be evidence faked. Was that something that bothered you or not?
Well, the anxiety was knowing that I was being watched so often. I had many undercover investigations on me. I wouldn't talk on telephones. I always watched when I was driving if somebody was following me. Anytime I met somebody new, I was careful the way I spoke because I knew that maybe they were sending somebody in, to try to trap me in something. So I was very aware of that. So whether you call it anxiety, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to call these emotions, but they were definitely there. I mean, I was on my guard quite often from both the street and from the law enforcement side. But it was more just being on my guard, being cautious, being aware. You can't put your head in the sand and think nothing's wrong. That's when you go down.
And I suppose if you've got this background sense of anxiety, then almost by definition, it's not really anxiety if it's not stopping your functioning. So I suppose what I'm asking is, did it impact your life? Did it stop you sleeping, for example? Did it make you question people around you? Was it uncomfortable? Or was it something you could just deal with?
It didn't stop me, from living my life. I mean, I was very aggressive on the street, business wise and otherwise. So no, didn't stop me from my social life. Didn't hurt me with my family. I just kept taking one day at a time and moving forward.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. So I was going to ask this towards the end, but it seems quite fitting now. So your manager Ella mentioned that you're always calm, nothing really rattles you. So I suppose my question is that like your natural characteristic? Were you always like that, or do you think after years and years of having all these dangers in the background, it just becomes white noise and you just adapt to it, or both, or neither?
Well, I learned my father, as the underboss of that family he was a good student of the life and he was my mentor. And he taught me, you can never lose control of yourself in that life. You have to maintain your composure. Losing control at the wrong time could be a trap, could be dangerous. And I had many sit downs with, guys from other families, business wise and otherwise. And I always had to maintain my composure. So it was just part of what I developed within myself. And, I mean, again, you have to be that way. And now everybody I knew in that life, that lost their composure or that were quick to judge somebody or quick to pull the trigger, none of them ever lasted. They never lasted. They got rid of them, you know? So I didn't want to be among those guys. So I always tried to think things out. I always tried to listen before I spoke. I always tried to be the last person to judge anybody because when your time comes, they'll remember, oh, this guy was quick to point the finger, or this guy wasn't quick to judge somebody, and you get treated the same way. So those are the skills that and strategies that you develop, you know, from 20 years on the street if you want to survive. And so I've just maintained that my entire life.
And it sounds like these are things that you kind of naturally gravitated towards, you naturally picked up. Nobody sits down and teaches you, or do they? Or do they, like, how to act and how to behave in these meetings? You just knew instinctively what to do.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my dad advised me, but then you know, you have to do it yourself. You know, you have to be that person. You can't put on an act. I mean, look, there's times, you know, I mean, look, my kids, I lose my composure a little bit, you know, stuff like that. But never out, never on the street, never outside. I mean, you know, when I did things, you know, maintaining my composure. And I never wanted to, you know, it's one of the reasons why I never drank. I never wanted to lose control of my senses because in that life, it's very dangerous. You know, I know guys that would go out and drink and they do something wrong when they're drunk, and that was never an excuse. You couldn't use that excuse. You know, you're obligated to maintain your composure in that life. So I never tried to do anything that would make me lose composure or lose my senses or, you know, or my whereabouts. Never.
Okay, but it must have been quite tempting because I remember you saying in a previous interview that you in the height of your career you were going out like 5 or 6 nights a week. So are you surrounded by people that are drinking, but you yourself chose not to?
Yeah, well, you know, I made the guys in my crew, I wouldn't let them get, I told them, if you guys get drunk, you're not allowed to come out with me, you know, because we have to maintain a certain appearance all the time. But yeah, I mean, I seen, you know, I was out in the club every night, 6 nights a week, at least 5, 6 nights a week. So that was my lifestyle back then. A lot of mob guys, we hung out in places like that. So yeah, we partied a lot, we did that, but I was always in control of my thoughts, always.
Okay, that's interesting. And in terms of other mental health issues, obviously you've seen a lot of trauma. I'm not going to ask you to relive any of it, but has that bothered you over the years? So specifically, did you ever get things like flashbacks, nightmares? Did you feel guilt? You know, did it bother you, the stuff that you saw, the trauma?
Yeah, all of those emotions. Yeah, guilt for sure. Flashbacks. My wife, you know, I quite often, and obviously I'm not aware of this, but I wrestle in my sleep. My wife hears me arguing with people in my sleep. I've thrown punches in my sleep. So I think it all comes out, you know, subconsciously. And then obviously there are things that, you know, that'll spur a thought that'll, you know, get you kind of emotional and you know, you feel guilty about things that you've done in that life. I mean, there's no question about it. If you don't, then there's something wrong with you.
And does that follow you even to now, would you say, or is it
Oh yeah.
dissipated?
No, it follows me even till now. You know, my faith has helped a lot with that because I don't understand how you can go through life believing that you've done some things that you really regret, but there's no forgiveness for them. There's no end, you know, there's no end game there, I should say. Maybe not call it a game, but you know, as a Christian, we believe that if we're sincerely repentful of our sins, that we are forgiven. And so I have to believe that.
Yeah.
I want to believe that. And yeah, I regret things that I've done in that life, no doubt.
Okay. Okay. What about positive kind of feelings and emotions? So forgive me for referencing Goodfellas because it's the only frame of reference that I have about the mafia lifestyle. But they were talking about how you almost felt like a celebrity. Everyone else was a schmuck waiting in line. Did it feel like that? Was there an air, not just you personally, but everybody in your crew, was there an air of like confidence or arrogance?
Yeah, you know, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. And I don't think people like arrogance. It's ugly and it's not attractive at all. It's a turnoff. But confidence is something that people can appreciate. And I always tried to separate the two. I was a very confident guy. I'm still a very confident guy. And as a result, and I say this with all humility, people are attracted to that type of person. And I have a lot of friends and I get a lot of, business offers and things like that because I am confident and I'm also honest. If I don't know something, I don't know something. I tell you, I don't know that. I surround myself with people that are smarter than me in certain things that I don't know anything about because
Yeah.
that's how you survive. The motto is do what you do best, delegate the rest. And that's how I've maintained my lifestyle. So, but did it feel good? Yeah, it felt great, getting in a ringside table at the club, people catering to you. It feels good, but there's a reason people do that. I mean, I go into a club, I see the maitre d', he gives me a good table, I'm slipping him 100, and people appreciate that. The valet parker, I want my car up front, but he's getting a 50 when I come out, so people appreciate that. They remember that. I mean, but if you're arrogant, if you say, hey, I'm who I am, just go get my car, well, people don't like that.
Yeah.
So you take care of people, you treat them with respect, and you get it back in spades. I've seen that my whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a final point on a kind of mental health within the mafia. So I suppose I'm thinking specifically of Sopranos here. Again, forgive me for my pop culture references, but Tony Soprano went to see a therapist and he had to hide it because he believes he would have been whacked. Is that hyperbole? Would that have happened in reality in the mafia life if somebody was seeing a therapist?
Absolutely. He would have been in the trunk of the car by the end of the week, along with the psychiatrist. But I will tell you, you brought up something that I remember. I had a good friend of mine. He was a made guy, and him and his brother actually killed their father, who was also a made guy. And the reason being because the father disrespected another made guy's woman. And that's a death note in that life. So I'm driving with him one day to Brooklyn, and I'm driving him home, right? So I get to it in front of his house and I say goodbye. He says, "No, wait a minute, wait, don't leave yet." So I wait there for him. He goes to the front door. He opens it up. I see him looking in, looking in, looking in. He's calling somebody. Nobody answers. He comes out and he gets back in the car. And I says, "What happened?" He said, "Well, nobody's home." I said, "But it's your house. What do you mean nobody's home?" He said, "Well, I can't go in the house." I said, "Well, why can't you go in the house?" He says, "Listen," he said, "my father, he had killed his father 30 years earlier. He said, the
Yeah.
ghost of my father haunts me in that house. I can't be alone."
Well,
So there's an idea of how things can get to certain people.
yeah, it just seems insane to me that they would send that man's own children to do the hit. Was that a common thing that it had to be somebody that was close to you?
Well, no, it didn't have to be, and I believe they could have refused it, but maybe and somebody else would have taken it on, but maybe they had resentment to their father. Who knows? I don't know the circumstances behind that.
Yeah. Okay. And just touching on something that you were talking about a couple of minutes ago, Michael, about this sort of lavish lifestyle. So obviously you were a multimillionaire at one point if you're making $8 million a week. Could you enjoy your money? So what I mean by that is, did you feel that you had to keep under the radar of the feds? Like how do you reconcile having all this money and wanting this lavish lifestyle versus not kind of flashing it in the face of the police?
Well, remember this, I also had, two automobile dealerships, a Chevrolet and a Mazda dealership. I had a leasing company. I owned an auto body shop. I had a film production company, so I had a lot of legitimate things also. So as far as me hiding anything, well, I had my own jet plane. I had a helicopter. I had a house in Long Island on 2 acres of land that I built for $1 million. I had a racquetball court in it. I had a house in Florida and I had a house in Marina Del Rey, California, and I had two boats in my backyard because I lived on the Intracoastal in Florida. So no, I didn't hide it.
You didn't hide it
I
very well.
enjoyed. No, I mean the old timers. My dad too. I didn't want to spend anything. They wouldn't drive a nice car. I said, "Hey, I'm earning this money. I'm going to enjoy it," and that's how I lived.
Do you think that makes you more of a target or made you more of a target though, or not?
Absolutely did. Yes, it made me
Yeah.
more of a target. But listen, if you can't enjoy your money, what's good is having it?
Yeah. Yeah. Fair point. And then tell us a little bit about solitary confinement, right? So you said 29 months and 7 days. Did you know at the beginning that it would be that long, or was it literally on a day-to-day basis?
No, I had no idea what they were going to do. They were very upset with me, the government. It was very difficult. I don't make light of it. I knew a lot of guys, well, I should say a lot of guys on my tier. they didn't handle it well. You know, lights go out and a lot of bad things and moaning and groaning. I think that's some of what I might hear in my sleep because I heard so much, you know, at night. It's very, very difficult. It could destroy you. Confinement like that is torture. There's no question about it. I'm very much against that for young people that go into the, you know, prison system. There has to be a better way to isolate them so it's not total isolation because it'll really destroy people. I got through it, you know, I was very blessed. Again, it was a matter of faith for me that sustained me and my desire to get home to my family. So, you know, I handled it okay, but it probably does have an impact on me that I don't even realize, you know, I don't know.
Okay. And when you say you handled it okay, did you have like a plan or a strategy? Like, did you try and account some activities, even if they're mental activities, for some part of the day? Was there a routine? Like, what was your strategy?
The thing that kept me going was the three things. Number one, reading everything I can get my hands on, and you know, obviously my Bible also. Second thing was I had a Sony Walkman, which enabled me to at least, you know, hear what was going on in the outside world. And number three was my phone call at night. I got they put the phone in my cell. I got friendly with the guards. And so all I asked them for, I said, listen, you know, I got to maintain relationship with my wife. All I care about is the phone. I said, you don't have to feed me. You don't have to do anything. Just give me a box of cereal. I'm good, but I want the phone. So they would put the phone in my cell at night at midnight, you know, when everything was closed down. And I'd stay on the call with my wife for an hour or two. Poor girl, I kept her up at night, but we look forward to the calls. So it was those three things that sustained me. And of course, my determination to get home, you
Yeah.
know, so I had to, I was on a parole violation 4 years, so I knew I had an end date, but they were also trying to indict me on another case. And so I was fighting that, and that fell apart. They never were able to indict me. So it just ended up to 4 years on the violation.
And could you fight it from solitary confinement? So did you have access to legal textbooks, etc., and papers
Uh,
in solitary confinement?
for a time, for 11 months out of that, I was able to go up to the law library for an hour a day. And so if I needed to get something or get on the phone with my attorney, I was able to do that. But I prepared a lot of the, you know, the issues that I needed to fight in the case. I prepared a lot of them and handed them to my lawyer. I had nothing but time on my hands, and I knew the law pretty well. Remember, I went to trial 5 times. I also, you know, was very active in helping my dad in his cases, so I understood the law, and I was able to be helpful in that regard. And ultimately, it won the day.
And am I right in saying you found religion pretty much during your time in solitary confinement? Is that correct?
Well, you know, it's everybody finds religion, but I think it's the other way around. I think God finally, you know, finds us. Well, well, maybe it's the other way around. You know, we find God or we recognize God during that time. And, you know, I had grown up as a Catholic, but I didn't have, you know, Catholicism to me was like a subject in school because I went to Catholic school. But it wasn't until, you know, my time in solitary that I really developed a relationship with my God. Yes.
And given that you just said that you were a bit skeptical, I think it's fair to say when you were younger about religion, how do you think the old you would have felt? So if you went back in time and you said that you'd found God and you find this redemption arc, how do you think somebody, the Michael Franzese in his 30s would have thought about that? Would you believe yourself?
Well, I didn't need God back then. You know, I was in control of my life. You know, I was doing all my things. So you don't turn to God when you don't need anything. You know, that's the unfortunate thing. We turn to God when we're desperate sometimes. But fortunately, we have a God that'll take us any way that we accept him. So, but no, when I was on the street, you know, very active, I was doing my thing and having success, and I didn't need God then. So that's what happens.
And how do you think your life would be different had you not found God in prison?
I believe that, you know, God had a different plan and a purpose for me. He's made it quite obvious over the past, you know, 25 years that I'm home. Um, I think that I could have gotten kind of bitter, maybe resentful. I don't think I'd be married today because my wife was a strong Christian. I think I would have had a different attitude, and I probably might have went back to the street.
Okay. So
And I
it's
could
almost
have. I could have because I didn't hurt anybody, you know, at that point. I publicly said that I was leaving the life, and I did, but I didn't hurt anybody in the process. So if I wanted to go back, they knew I was an earner, I probably could have gotten back on the street.
Okay. And as well as solitary confinement, something that I've heard you speak about in interviews is that the feds would intentionally move prisons and move you around. Why were they doing that, and how did it all work?
You know, it's called diesel therapy, where, you know, they never let you get settled into any one place. And, you know, you're there a week or two or three. They pick you up in the middle of the night, put you on a plane, and send you somewhere where you don't know you're going. And then they put you in the hole in that place, and you're there for another week or two. It's extremely difficult. It's the worst part of any prison. It's worse than being in solitary
Yeah.
because you're constantly moving. You can't get a visit. Very difficult to go to get a phone call. Your family doesn't know where you are because they, you know, they don't give out that information, and they just want to wear you down. And they do. I mean, it's terrible. I was on that for months, and it wore me down and wore me out. And finally, they just, you know, let me settle into solitary. But it's very difficult. It really is.
And I imagine that part of the process is forming good relationships with the guards. Like you said, they gave you an access to a phone, and if they keep changing prisons, then you have to go through that entire process and work your way
Yeah.
through the admin from the beginning, right?
It's a nightmare to even think about. When I think about it, it's like I don't even want to think about it. It's like a time that's just gone in my life, thank God, and I'm not there anymore.
Okay, I'll stop asking you questions.
No, it's okay. It's all right.
You've kind of already answered this, but I'm just going to ask it directly in case there's anything else you want to add. What kind of character traits are helpful or good to be a good mobster, and vice versa? What kind of things will are you signing yourself up for doom?
Well, one, maintain composure. Number two, be a good listener. Don't shoot your mouth off and say things out of turn. Number three, be the last person to judge somebody. You know, always try to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, at least initially. If the evidence piles up against that person, well, that's it. But at least you're not the one that's trying to pull him down. Those three things are very important. And follow the rules. You know, you have certain rules, follow them. You know, if you're a good earner and you spread the wealth around, that's a big plus for you because people in that life want to earn. You know, I sat down with my crew once. I had 15 guys around me. None of them were made. And I told them straight out, I said, listen, if any of you guys want to get made, this is not the place for you. I'm not going to propose any of you. And they said, why not? I said, very simple. I'm going to put a lot of time and effort into you. And if I propose you and you get made, I lose you. You're your own guy. So all the effort I put into you is gone. So I don't resent it. If you want to go somewhere else, you got my blessing. I hope everything works out for you. That's number one. I said, secondly, if you want to make money, this is the place to stay because I'm not a greedy guy. I'm going to spread the wealth and you guys are going to get wealthy. And nobody left. They wanted to earn the money, you know? So that's important in that life. If people know you're an earner and you're willing to spread it around, it goes a long way.
And speaking of following the rules, did you, obviously without mentioning any specific names, were there situations where people would misreport how much they were earning? Because obviously you have to pass a certain amount upwards up the chain, up the hierarchy, right? It must have been quite tempting to underreport how much you make and keep some of the money. Did that happen, and what would be the consequences?
Well, listen, you got to understand, we're on the street, you know, there's nobody there. There's no priests and, you know, we're street guys. So yeah, of course it happens. You know, I told my Russian guys that when my partners in the gas business, when I cut a deal with them, I said, listen, 75% me, 25% you. And they said, why not 50-50? I said, very simple. I said, because I know you're going to steal a little bit. I said, this way I don't feel too bad. I'm taking the bigger end up front. I said, but don't let me catch you stealing. I said, but, and they turned around and they said, okay, good deal. You know, so listen, it's the street. You gotta give a little leeway to people because you understand what's going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how I looked at it. And I had a great relationship with them for 7 years. We were good partners. And, you know, there's certain things I look the other way, but they're bringing me a lot of money too. So why would I cut it was, you know, you don't bite the hand that feeds you, so to speak. So
Yeah.
they were making good money with me.
Okay. Yeah. So they appreciated your honesty, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
A bit random, but can you tell me about a time where, obviously, we've spoken about how your equanimity and how you're a very naturally calm persona. Can you tell me about a time where you lost your temper in that life? Something that made you angry?
Um, Let me see. I mean, look, a couple of times, you know, with my own guys, you know, one time I really lost my temper because a guy smacked somebody from another family and made him run. No, actually, he wasn't with another family, but he was in the gas business and he made him run to somebody else that I had to deal with. Instead of, treating him the right ways and let me deal with him, he got the guy scared because he said, if this guy smacked me, imagine what Michael's going to do. And he ran to another person. And, so I got very upset with the guy that did that. And I said, you're not a tough guy. What are you doing that for? Now you chased him to another family. Now we're going to have a whole sit down over it. I was very, very angry with the guy. But I mean, I didn't hit him or anything like that, but I was very angry. Things like that got me. When you did something stupid or something that you should know better, that got me upset. And, there was a couple of incidents like that. I'm not saying that, that I never lost my temper, but I didn't lose it in a situation that I would pay for it. I knew when to lose my temper and when not to.
And did you have to sort that situation out? So did it lead to a sit down and
Yeah,
was it a headache
absolutely.
for
Yeah,
you? Yeah.
it absolutely made. I mean, he made this guy run to another guy, and as a result, the other guy now took hold of him, and he was making money too. He could have been our guy. Instead we chased him to somebody else that I had to deal with. Things like that on the street you don't like.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to keep control of your people as best you can. So he just didn't know how to deal with the situation. The problem is the guys on the streets that are associates, when they get around a made guy, they think in their head that they're tough guys too.
Yeah, yeah.
So they start to play the part and they start to act a certain way. And it's, but that's part of the street life. You got to deal with it. Everybody's different.
Okay. Moving on, just a few more quick fire questions. That's all right, Michael. What's the biggest misconception you think that the public have about the mafia? Like myself, a lot of us only really get our impressions from like movies and TV shows.
Well, listen, I think one impression that people get, and I've heard this many times, when a guy is a made guy and he gets in trouble and goes to jail, the family takes care of him and his family and all of that. That's absolutely not true. You're on your own most of the time. When my father went to prison, he had some things on the street. He had Shylock money out. He had a couple of things that he owned. But after that money ran out, he had nothing. Nobody was handing our family anything. So, it was one of the reasons why I got out on the street to help support my family. I think that's a big misconception. Look, there was a misconception at one time, or there was an idea at one time that, the life is built on loyalty and respect and honor. And to a certain degree, it is. It's like anything else. I compare it to the government. There are some people in the government that really want to do well for the people that put them in office. They really want to do well for the country. There are some people. And then there's a big majority of people that are just corrupt. They get into that office for their own purpose, to serve their own agenda, to make money, to stay in power. And it's the same way on the street. There are a few guys that honor and respect meant a lot, loyalty meant a lot. And for other guys, it was nonsense. And unfortunately, a lot of times, there's a lot of betrayal in that life. There really is. And I've seen it, and I think the public has seen it now. But it's the street. You got to accept it.
Okay. And a bit of a personal question, if you don't mind. You mentioned your father. You've said in other interviews that you don't really discuss your previous life with your children, but obviously that they're nothing to do with it. Was there any resentment towards your father for drawing you in?
No, I have no resentment for drawing me in because that was my decision. My dad would have let me stay in school. It was my decision without a doubt. So I don't resent him for that. The only resentment I had with my dad, was really the fact that he didn't take responsibility for the destruction of our family, which was totally destroyed. My mother, my brother, my sisters, totally destroyed. And he never took responsibility for that. And I don't know. I don't know if I call it resentment. I just didn't like that about him because he should have taken responsibility. It would have made me feel better about him. But other than that, no, I love my dad. I understood my dad. I knew his personality. I knew what he was about. So I love my dad.
And was that something you could have raised with him, do you think? What you've just been talking about, or is that a bit of a touchy subject?
I did raise it with him. I did, and he wouldn't take responsibility for it. I told him, Dad, you got violated 5 times on parole. After your second and third time, I told you got to leave New York. You can't make it here, and the family's falling apart. And he didn't want to do it. I said, pick them up, pick mom, the kids, go down someplace, go out to California. They're not going to bother you out here like they do in New York. And he didn't want to do it. So that was problematic for me, but you know, what are you going to do?
Yeah. What are you
You
going
know,
to do? Yeah, absolutely. All right, one last question, then I'm going to ask you about your talks. Tell my viewers a little bit about your talk. And my last question is, can you tell us, you've done so many interviews, I've seen many of them. Can you tell us something that people don't know about Michael Franzese, either something about what you do in your life or something about your personality, something unexpected?
well, gosh, I mean,
Put you on the spot.
I am kind of private in some things. People asked me one time what my favorite movie was of all time, and I said The Sound of Music, and everybody went crazy. Sound of Music. We would have thought it would have been The Godfather or Goodfellas. I said, no, Sound of Music. I said, I love that movie. I love the music. I love everything about it. And so I guess, I'm kind of a romantic at heart too. I'm very, how could I put it? I'm very, uh, what's the word? I'm trying to find the word. Like I put my wife on a pedestal, I'm very giving to her. I'm very giving to my kids. Um, my wife, I think she thinks that, you know, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I've always learned something. One of my other mottos in life, the best way to defeat your enemies is to make them your friends. So there's times when my wife thinks that I'm a little too easy with people. And I said, just understand my strategy with people. And people don't, at first blush, they don't think that of me, but I'm pretty easy. I'm a great partner. I really am because I don't bother you. If you're a partner, I expect you to be loyal and trustworthy and do the right thing. I've got hurt a couple of times, but that's life. You brush it off and you move forward. But I don't know if there's any deep, dark secrets, can't really, I can't really say that.
No exclusive here on A Psych for Soul Minds.
No, I can't.
Can
Now, if my
you
wife was here, she might tell you something, but I
yeah,
can't.
maybe she's the next person to interview. Can you tell us a little bit about your talks, please, Michael? I'm going to go see you in Holborn on the 17th of May. What should we expect?
I'll tell you, one of the things that I think, and I noticed this from my YouTube channel, and now I'm on Rumble. People are very curious about the origin of the life in the United States. And I'm going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the mafia in the US from the time they migrated over from Sicily, right up until, the current time. I'm going to get into Al Capone and Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. We're going to get into a little bit of a history of that. And then I'm going to obviously tell a bit of my story, but in the context of something that people are going to find very interesting.
Yeah,
And look, I've been doing this a long time. I know what people want to hear. I know what excites them. I know what gives them, reason to think about their own lives. Because remember, I'm a motivational speaker also. And
yeah,
I like people to walk out of my feeling good. Hey, I learned something. I feel good about something. I even learned something about myself. Maybe a question was answered about me. And it's going to be exciting. We got some video behind us that people are going to enjoy. We do a Q&A. We have a VIP session there where I take photos with people. We maybe have a drink of wine together. We do a lot of stuff. So I always enjoy my events. And I got to tell you, I absolutely loved the time I spent in the UK in 2022. People were just wonderful. I mean, I didn't realize how many people knew who I was and knew me. I'd be walking down the street. Guys would come out of a pub and grab me, come in to have a beer with them. I remember one time I got into a taxi and a guy says to me, "Hey, Mr. Franzese, you don't have to pay. Can I just get an autographed copy of your book?" I said, "Well, I don't have one on me." He says, "Well, where are you staying? I'll meet you at your hotel." And he actually came the next day and met me there. So, I mean, people were just great. I'm looking forward to coming back. I'm getting a lot of great feedback from this upcoming trip. So, and it starts on May 12th. And I think you have the schedule, right?
yeah. I'm going to put the schedule in the comments, so I would expect to see some of my Psych for Soul Guy viewers there. Mr. Francis, I'd just like to say thank you so much for your time. Really interesting chat. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. I liked your questions. You were different, and I had a good time with you. So hopefully, what town are you coming to?
Going to Holborn in London, so I'll see you on the
Oh, all
17th.
right.
I'll
Well,
come
make
say
sure you
hello.
come up. Make sure you come to the VIP section or whatever, and we get to say hello and maybe have a little drink of Franzese wine, which, by the way, we now have a distributor in the UK. So you're going to be seeing a lot of me and a lot of our wine.
Sounds perfect. Thank you so much. So there you have it, folks. That is the legend that is Michael Franzese. A very fascinating man, very eloquent. He's got loads of interviews all over YouTube if you're interested to know more about his backstory, although, of course, not as personal or in-depth as my interview. Definitely go check out his talks. I will leave the links to the dates of the tour in the comments section. If you're interested in true crime and mental illness and the crossover betwixt the two, go check out my YouTube channel, Psych for Sore Minds. I haven't done interviews in a long time, but I've got loads of material about myths about certain legal aspects like restraining orders, female prisons, etc., etc. I've done my own psychoanalysis of really high-profile true crime cases like Lucy Letby, like Jimmy Savile, etc., etc. Go chiggity check it out, and I will see you next time. Peace. Oh yeah, buy my goddamn book.